So one of the questions that I tend to get quite a lot of, and I'm sure a lot of other au pairs get as well, is it really worth it to be an au pair? Hey guys, it's Graham with AuPairWorld, and today I'm going to be answering the infamous question, is it really worth it to be an au pair? Before I answer this question, and before I get into this video, if you haven't already, please like AuPairWorld and subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with all the new content that we're producing. Thank you so much for the support, and that being said, let's jump right into this video. So one of the questions that I tend to get quite a lot of, and I'm sure a lot of other au pairs get as well, is it really worth it to be an au pair? Once you factor in all the things, all the expenses, the time, is it worth the effort to go about doing it, or should you pursue other avenues? So in this video, I am not going to tell you what's best, because for me, it was worth it. Obviously, here I am, still an au pair, but for other people, it might not be worth it. So I'm gonna give you a few questions that are gonna help you figure out whether it's going to be worth it for you, whether it's worth your time and your money, or whether you should look into some other things. I've got 4 questions here, and each one kind of builds on the prior question. So be sure to listen to the very end to get all the questions, and if your answer to any of these is no, then you might should look into other things. Lastly, before I get into the first question, if you have any thoughts on this, be sure to let us know down in the comments below. We would love to know what you're thinking. So getting the intro out of the way, the first question that I would ask you if you're considering whether it's worth it to be an au pair or not is, do you have time and money to go abroad? One of the most common misconceptions about au pairing is that it is a free way to travel, or that the host family pays for everything. And normally that's not the case. Now, don't get me wrong, you might strike gold. You might find a host family that will pay for your travel, your insurance, your money, your language school, your everything. But the majority of host families don't pay for all that stuff. So you are gonna have some expenses, and au pairing is not free. If you budget wisely, and if you do save up some of your pocket money, you will pay off the things that you spend. But that's not to say that up front you're not gonna have to spend any money, or you're not gonna have to pay for anything, because that's not true. Some things that you're gonna have to consider is, number 1, travel to your host country. A lot of au pairs don't think about this, but if you're traveling to a different country, you're gonna have to pay for it, and sometimes it can be expensive. Now, of course, if you're going from, say, Germany to Spain, or from France to Italy, it's probably not gonna be that expensive. But if you're like me, if you have to take a 9 or a 10-hour flight to get to your host country, that can get really expensive really quickly. So you need to think about round-trip flights, and if you want to be going home during your au pair stay. Do you have the money to pay for that? And if you don't have the money right now, are you willing to save up the money? You also need to think if you need a visa. Now, of course, if you're being an au pair in a Schengen country and you are a member of the EU, then you don't have to worry about visas. But if you're an American going to Europe, or a European going to the US, or any other country for that matter outside of the European Union, you're gonna have to worry about visas, and those cost money. Some other things to consider that are going to cost money: you might have to pay for transit inside of your host country, health insurance, language school, and some other little fees like that. So it's not free, and you will probably have to spend a bit of money. One thing that I tell au pairs is you are going to have some expenses in your host country outside of language school and insurance and things like that. Just things like eating out with your friends, or perhaps taking a trip. Those things do cost money, and if it's too expensive, your pocket money might not cover it all. So you're gonna wanna have some money saved up to go and do those things, because you don't want to miss out on these opportunities. One of the biggest things that I tell au pairs is to make sure that you have enough money to buy a return ticket home, whether that be a train ticket or a plane ticket. Make sure that if something goes wrong, if things don't pan out quite how you wanted them to, that you're gonna have enough money to get back home, because if not, you're gonna be left in a really uncomfortable situation. The last thing I'll say on this point is au pairing will also take up a chunk of your time. Okay, so this kind of goes without saying, but when you're an au pair, you are going to likely be in your host country anywhere from a couple of months to maybe even a couple of years. So you're gonna have to plan to spend that time outside of your home country and away from your life. If you don't have enough time to spend a whole year as an au pair, you should consider being a summer au pair like I first was. Normally, this is just a couple of months, it's much more inexpensive, and it is so fun to be a summer au pair. It's just a blast. So to wrap up this point, being an au pair is something to plan for. Generally, people don't just run and do it. It does cost money, it does cost your time, so you should plan in advance and make sure you have plenty of both. The second big question you need to ask yourself when you're considering becoming an au pair is, are you willing to leave your home country and the things there? I think this point seems a bit obvious, but for me, I didn't really realize this until after I became an au pair. But when you become an au pair, you are leaving your life in your home country. It stays there. And possibly one of the most painful things is life keeps moving without you. So you need to ask yourself, are you ready to leave your friends and your family, maybe a job you like, a degree that you're trying to get? All these things are questions, and of course, a lot of these things are going to be there when you get back. I still keep in touch with my friends back home. Obviously, I still talk with my parents, but you are gonna have to sacrifice things to become an au pair. You can't have everything. One of the biggest upsides to this point is you're going to build a whole new life in your host country. This was something that I totally didn't expect, and it blew me away. But here in Spain, I have a life. I have a life that I don't have back home in the US. About a month ago, I took a trip back to the US to see my family and my friends, and it felt really weird because it was almost like I took off one skin and put on another. Because my life back home in the US, while it is still my life, it's completely separated from my life here in Spain. It's almost like I'm two different people and I have a double life, but that is what being an au pair is kind of like. You have a life in your home country and you have a life in your host country, and sometimes that can be really difficult to balance the two. The worst part about this is when you do go back to your home country, you have to leave your life in your host country. So you're gonna have to leave a lot of your friendships and a lot of the things you enjoy doing, which is so difficult. I speak from experience. It's really, really tough, but in the end, it is definitely worth it for me. The third big question you need to ask yourself is, are you ready to learn a new language and a new culture? I jokingly call this the silent killer of au pairs because learning the language and culture of your host country is so important, and oftentimes it can totally make the difference between a good experience and a bad experience. And this can be a really difficult thing to do. I grew up in a small town in the USA. My family just spoke English. My community just spoke English. It was really one culture, one language. So I never had to think about balancing more than one culture or speaking more than one language. So when I came to Spain, learning Spanish culture, it blew my mind. It was crazy and I love it, obviously, here I am. But nonetheless, it is something that you do have to prepare for. You should be prepared to devote some portion of your time to learning your host country's language and their culture. Ultimately, learning the language of your host country is going to make your stay go a lot more smoothly. And a lot of this depends on where you go, of course. If you're an au pair going to Sweden and you speak English, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about learning Swedish because everyone there speaks English. But if you're going to be an au pair in a small town in Italy, you should be prepared to learn Italian because there's probably not going to be a lot of people that speak your native language. Another thing to consider here is your host family might not speak your language. Again, a lot of this depends on the country, as I think a lot more adults in, say, Germany and the other Northern European countries do speak English. But if you are going to a country such as Spain, France, Italy, there's a good chance your host family isn't going to speak your language. This can be a really big benefit because if they can't speak your language, you are going to learn their language very quickly. But the downside here is this makes it extremely difficult to communicate. In my second au pair experience, my au pair horror story, essentially what it all boiled down to was my Spanish was not good enough to communicate just in Spanish, and my host family didn't speak any English. So it made the situation really, really uncomfortable, and we just had a huge series of miscommunications. So I really cannot stress the importance of learning the language of your host country, or at least being able to communicate with your host family in a neutral language. You should also be ready for the possibility that the kids might not speak a language that you speak. A lot of host families want au pairs so that the au pair can teach their children the native language of the au pair, mostly English, French, or German. So you need to be prepared that the host kids might not speak a language that you speak, which will make it very difficult for you to communicate and build a relationship with them. If you're not so good with languages, or if you don't speak the language of your host country, try to look for a family that's going to speak the same language as you. This is really important. The last question you need to ask yourself to determine whether it's going to be worth it for you to become an au pair is, are you ready for the responsibility of children? Another one of the big misconceptions about au pairing is just to go to a new country and to meet new people and party and travel cheaply. But that's not at all what au pairing is. Sure, all of those things are included in au pairing, and you do have the chance to do all of that. But au pairing, the very definition of it is you're taking care of somebody else's kids, and that is a huge responsibility. When you move in with a family, you are entrusted with their most prized possession, their children. So you're gonna have to show a lot of responsibility, be the adult in the situation, when you're taking care of these kids. More than just taking care of them, your host kids are going to watch you. They are going to look up to you. They are going to listen to what you say, because kids just do that with adults. Adults are a child's role model, so you need to be prepared for the responsibility of not just taking care of them physically, but also emotionally, and helping them become good people. This country's so loud. One thing to keep in mind is, as a family's au pair, you are going to become a major part of their lives. Now, this does depend on the family, as some families are just going to be looking for more employees and some are going to be looking for another member of the family. But regardless of your situation, you are going to become a big part of the kids and the host parents' lives. In respect to the children, they are going to look up to you. This means that you're going to become someone who's important for them. They're probably going to want to imitate you, to be more like you. So you need to be on your best behavior when you're around the kids, and also be willing to show a bit of responsibility in not just taking care of them, but helping form them. The big thing to keep in mind here is, as an au pair, you're not just there to party. You're not just there to have fun. You are there to take care of somebody else's kids, and more than just physically take care of them, you are going to help them become bigger people. So you need to be prepared for that responsibility. Alright guys, so that wraps up the video on, is it worth it or not to become an au pair? If you answered yes to these questions, then it's probably going to be worth it for you to become an au pair. Even if you answered no to some of them, it still might be worth it for you. You're just going to have to talk to au pairs and figure that out. Thank you so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed it, please be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment down below. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, and goodbye. Hasta luego.